The Frowning Andi Toy Company. Written and read by Mary Teresa. Copyright 2017. Frowning Andi was a doll for little girls. This was in the days when little girl dolls were made for little girls, and little boys had their own kind of dolls. Frowning dolls proved unpopular, and not many were sold. The Frowning Andi Toy Company went bankrupt soon after the disastrous holiday season. The local toy store bought too many of the Frowning Andys and not enough of the other little girl dolls. It was a good thing boys weren't so particular about the expression their dolls had painted on their faces, for this allowed the local toy store to function for just that much longer. The girl was not pleased when she pulled the wrapping paper from the Frowning Andi box. She threw a tantrum and tossed the box aside, without even taking the doll from it. When she was 2, such events were found amusing. She was now 12. Her attention span was short, and the family was wealthy. Mistress offered her daughter another present from the still sizable mound, and the tantrum was soon forgotten. The Andi doll was pushed further and unceremoniously out of sight and under the discarded paper. The maid found the doll when she was picking the wrapping paper up piece by piece and carefully smoothing out the wrinkles. Mistress was particular about this. She claimed to her friends she reused even wrapping paper. As the family held many events where presents were exchanged, much paper had been smoothed out and carefully folded over the 6 years the maid had worked for them. She knew exactly how much, for she stowed the carefully folded paper on the back shelves in the garage. The maid put the frowning doll in the basket she'd brought purposely to take the leftovers from the feast home. The mistress pretended not to notice. In this manner, mistress was kind. They shared a hand-rolled cigarette, a secret they kept from the husband and child. Mistress asked the maid for a couple of cigarettes to last her through the night. The maid took a cab home that evening, as the buses had stopped running at 6. Mistress gave her a Christmas bonus that was enough for the cab fare, with plentiful remaining. She was kind in such ways too, even if she was a mite peculiar with her wrapping paper and tantrum-prone child. The maid extracted the frowning Andi and wrapped some ribbons around the box. Placing a bow on its top, it was a present again. "Won't go all the way there," Cabby said when the maid gave her address. "Cabby got killed just a block away last week." He glared somewhat at her. She knew the neighborhood rumors placed the blame on some love triangle, but the maid got the impression the cabby here thought her somehow responsible. "It's a nice night for walking," she said, and she smiled. His face relaxed somewhat. "Heard they're going bankrupt," he said, and he jerked his head backward in the direction of Mistress's house. "I hope not," the maid said with some alarm. "I need this job," she muttered. The cabby heard none the less, as a whole lot of his tips and safety comes with noticing muttered comments. "Might just be a rumor," he said. They didn't talk again the 20 minutes left in the drive. She gave him a tip. He was only at the start of his shift, and working the holidays is always crappy. Of course, the cabby had no particular religious holdings, and was happy to take the shift, because people gave better tips for that very reason. He looked at her wrinkled brow, still worried with the rumor of Mistress's bankruptcy, and he handed the tip back to her. You might need it more than me, he said, and he skidded off before she could say anything more. The windows on the houses in her neighborhood didn't have metal bars on them. A block away was where a person could see such defenses, and a block away was where a lone gunshot rang out in the chill air. She pushed herself to go faster, but she was overburdened with the basket of food and the doll's box. Shouts could be heard in the distance, but the shouts faded away, moving further away from her, and she relaxed her pace. The sounds of merriment came from her side of the fourplex. It was the only unit with lights on. The aromas of festive food assailed her as soon as she opened the door, and her daughter, who'd been watching for her, squeezed through the gaggle of people. "Mum!" she called as she propelled herself into the maid. She hugged her mum's hand and unburdened her of the doll. "Merry Christmas, baby," the maid said. The Frowning Andi Toy Company went bankrupt. The news reported it on Boxing Day, and while the newscaster was relaying this news, the backdrop showed the burned wreck of the house where the maid worked. The owner of the company and the house had died in the fire, though mistress and her daughter were safe, having left the home the night before. The newscaster had no further details, and the maid had no way of getting more on her own. The doll's frown seemed particularly bleak. The sound of a car pulled the maid to the front window, and she watched with some amazement as mistress disembarked from her luxury sedan. Her own house was in some disarray, for the Christmas Day's festivities had gone long into the night. The firm knock signifying the arrival of mistress gave her no time to straighten up, and she opened the door just a sliver, as if she didn't know who was on the other side. Mistress smiled. Her face held no hint of tears. "I won't be needing your services after the holidays, but I have a good friend who could use your help." The maid's eyes widened, and she started to say how sorry she was about the woman's loss. Mistress held up her hand. "You know we weren't happy. He was a buffoon." She brushed aside a tear that appeared nonetheless and added, "It'll be hard on my daughter. They were quite close." She took a deep breath and continued, "Guess I shouldn't have kept all that wrapping paper. Firemen said it acted as tinder, and the fire spread that much more quickly because of it." She paused, and the maid waited for her to continue. "Anyway, I didn't want you to worry over the holidays." She handed the maid an envelope and told her there was severance pay in it, and the contact information for her new job. The cause of the fire was never discovered. As far as anyone knew, except perhaps the maid, no one in the household smoked. Certainly no cigarette butt was ever found.